You're hitting like 20.
Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to go through a series of optimizations. It's going to probably take quite a while. I will pause the video so that everyone who's with me live can try the settings. And what you want to do is check your stats window here in the game window and leave that on, play the game and watch the frame rate. And hopefully the frame rate will either stay the same or go up as you're going through these optimizations. You may not want to do everything I'm showing you because maybe your game is more high res. The example that I'm using is in the course and it's a low res game, which I think is better because then you can really push this to the limit. But again, if it doesn't look good, play the game first, right? It may not look good here, but when you play the game, it looks fine. And if you can't tell any difference, you probably want to keep the setting. All right, so the second thing you want to do is to start with, go up here to edit, project settings. And then there's a quality setting and we'll start kind of from here. This is the default where you have all the levels are checked. You can add more quality levels. This is an ultra quality. We will go in and modify these, but notice the pixel light count is 4. Trying to look at the example here. Hold on one second and let me tell you, see if this is because I've made some changes.
I'll make a mention real fast. When you
Sure.
add a quality level, you can set it up so that it's all the numbers are your own numbers. So basically it would be it's basically a custom quality level.
Yeah, let's say you're working on various projects and you know you're going to want to do the same quality level, and you can create I guess a prefab or a settings that you can just go back and everything's all set up for you.
Where do you enter your own numbers?
You have to add a quality level and then
Oh.
you would mess with it. See, it says level 6. You would click on it and you would go through and start adjusting the stuff in there according to what you want, because maybe you have something that would be in the low quality level set differently than that would be in the ultra quality level, but you want different versions of things. So you want something that's in the ultra quality level and something that's in the low quality level, and you can adjust that stuff in your own custom quality level.
So what was the first thing you did again?
Turn on your I would set your game window next to your scene window, or have it up open somewhere that's convenient, and then turn on the stats and then play your game and notice what frame rate you're getting.
I was getting like 25.
Okay, so as we go through this exercise, it should go up. I'm looking at his settings. He's got full 4 for pixel light. Texture quality is full res. Atmospheric textures is forced on 2x sampling. So this is the default. So we're going to go in and make some changes here. Okay, so let's close that. And let me fast forward. All right, so the first one here is okay. So let me go to the next one, and then I'll give you. I'll pause the recording and let you guys practice with this. Okay. So we're going to go into the directional light here. So I don't have everything in this project that you will have. So I've gone in and I've made some stuff that's just empty, right? And I've dragged in like an object. Okay, so in the directional light, go over to the inspector. And the first thing that he did is he changed the shadow type from soft to hard. And that it's easier to do hard shadows. Now they're not going to look as good, right? And then the strength, the default is 100 is 1. Try bringing that down to, he brought it down to, I think 0.75.
It also depends upon what kind of scene you have. So
Exactly.
if you have something that's really, really bright, or you want it to look really bright, you can turn your shadows way down. I tend to leave it at like 0.8, maybe a little bit less. It's just kind of a feel thing. A
Okay.
look.
So everyone, go ahead and try the hard shadows. And again, the shadows are really important for some of you. I think it's really important that they look right. And that Gaia stuff looks really good with those shadows.
Yeah.
Probably the dungeon, Chris, that you're doing, it may not matter. So he does, I'm not sure what order he's doing this in. He doesn't describe why he's doing what he's doing. And he doesn't describe if there's an order. If it was me, I probably would do the stuff that's easiest and it's going to give you the most bang for the buck first. I don't know.
Shadows is definitely a huge thing.
Yeah, I have a feeling that he did this first because it's easy and you will have shadows, and he just turned it off immediately to hard shadows. There's one other time where he talks about lighting and shadows as well. Okay, let me give you one more and then we'll pause. So the next one is you're going to go over to the project settings
Go to edit.
and graphics. Let me fast forward. Okay, and he's going to go to quality level, and he says reduce the quality of the what is that? All right, so what he recommends you do here is you go to medium right here, and notice that readjusts these numbers here.
Yeah, because that's what the settings are for the medium.
Yep. So right now you're setting the image quality to medium. Okay. Next, he says get rid of the anisotropic textures and disable that. Okay. And then the anti-aliasing is really, really a big deal. You're probably going to want anti-aliasing. I know that when we do graphics, we really make the anti-aliasing is making curved edges smooth. If you turn it off, it makes it really ragged and hard, and it looks computerish. So try disabling the anti-aliasing, but if that doesn't look good, then do 2.
By the way, I got to like 56 by turning off like ultra
Yeah.
settings, if that's okay.
One last thing before I'll let you guys go is down here, there's another shadowing right here under shadows. You can also turn this to hard shadows only. If that doesn't look good, notice there's a hard and soft shadows. And I think what that does, I'm guessing, is that Unity tries to make an educated guess as to what stuff definitely needs soft shadows and keeps it, but things that don't need it turns it off and saving you footprint. All right, sorry, Chris, let me pause this and you guys can go ahead and I'll leave that open. Okay, he says that you can probably bump the resolution here from low to medium. And then the shadow distance is also something that you can adjust. The default is 20. Right? And then he recommends that you leave this as to no, this is the default 20 by 20 shadow distance. And shadows near the plane offset is 3. That's meters. Is that what that means, Stephen? 20 meters?
I figure it probably is.
I think what that
Just like-
means is that,
Just like the shadow distance would be 20 meters.
yeah, when you're within 20 meters, you'll see shadows. Is that what that means?
Yeah. So you have to be careful of that. You might, if you start like seeing like a line with your shadows, like it's like kind of cutting it off, you might want to make that larger. So it all depends upon what you're seeing.
I missed when you said about the resolution. Which one did you change?
Medium
Medium resolution,
under quality. Yeah, up here, I changed it to medium.
the shadow resolution. Oh, okay.
Yeah, and up here. Now he's recommending, I believe that the default here is 2 cascades, but he's recommending no cascades. I don't understand what that means.
No idea. If you go over the shadow cascades with your, it doesn't say anything, does it? There it does. Number of cascades for directional light shadows. Well, that doesn't help me very much.
What's the quadruple quadrant?
Right.
Well, it's the what the quadrant you get in quadruple.
Right. That didn't help much.
if-
So
By the way, if you have to ask those questions, it's probably a setting that sounds like it does thing, but it actually doesn't do that much.
Okay, sorry, one more thing, under here, under vsync count. He's saying don't sync,
let's see what this is.
limit refresh rate to avoid tearing. Something with your video, it's not refreshing, I guess. I imagine that would only affect it if you're changing things and you have a lot of animation that you're going through. But he recommends turning that to don't sync. Says you won't be needing it, at least in his game. So at this point, he says, close this project settings and play your game. Notice if there's any quality loss. And on his example, he didn't see any at all. So we've saved, he went from, I think, 20 frames per second up to 40 or something. But he's got a low poly game.
Which I found kind of interesting that it was so low in the first place.
I think he probably did this. I think he probably set it up, really badly optimized.
Yeah.
And then, okay. So
We're
let
on a
me,
bad machine.
yeah. Okay. So this is all getting recorded. So you can always go back and I think the best way to learn this is just to do it. Like I've done it. This is the second time today I'm doing this, and it's kind of coming together. But the first time I was pretty lost. All right. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to textures, and we need to adjust the texture maps. Okay, so he's saying that you need to generate the MIP map on the texture map. So click on the texture. And advanced texture type, MIP maps is down here. Generate MIP maps right there. Make sure that's checked. Yeah, there's just so many settings, it's crazy. You can also play around with the max size as well down here. He recommends keeping it at 512, but you can always go up to 1024. Those are all resolution sizes. You probably recognize all those numbers. They're actually powers of 2, right? I think 2 raised to the 8th power is 512. So these are all real standard numbers in computers, right?
Yep.
So I would just go ahead and try it at 256 and see how it looks. If it looks okay, leave it. It may not, and then just jump it up to 512. And then if 512 doesn't look good, raise it up to 1024.
And anything over 1024 probably would be more for high definition stuff, I would think.
Yeah. The last thing that he suggests here is to use crunch compression. And then the compressor quality, I've set mine to 50. I believe it was 100 when I got here. But again, this is something you can experiment with. I mean, there's just a lot of experimentation. As you do this more, I think it'll become, faster. But for now, this is a slow process, but I think it's really good to just explore these different areas of the inspector. Do you know what that crunch compressor is?
No. No, but
So it's to save space on the disk when applicable. I guess it's just compressing the graphics. One thing that
Yeah.
I did learn is that when you're getting your graphics for your textures and materials ready, it doesn't really matter what format you use, whether it's PNG, GIF, JPEG, TIFF. What Unity does is it uses its own proprietary compression codec, and it just converts everything for you. When you publish, it just converts it all,
And
which
he
I think is
set him,
pretty cool.
he set it to 70 for the quality.
He didn't, he set it to 50.
Okay. I'm just messing with something, checking.
Oh, you need to hit apply.
Yeah.
But you have 70.
One thing that he said is that as you compress this down further and apply it, it should get pretty grungy, which is kind of nice. It's kind of nice that you can do it in real time and just kind of again, I just turn it down until it no longer looks acceptable. This is not a good example because I don't have much there, but probably 50 is a good place to start. And if it looks okay, keep going down until it no longer looks good, and then go back to the last setting that was acceptable. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is the main camera. So go ahead and let me pause this and you guys can experiment with all this. All right, go to the main camera. And here you're going to do the clipping planes. Now the default is set to 1000. So what that means is that the camera will look out to 1000 meters. Anything beyond 1000 meters, it's not rendering at all. Stephen, is that right?
Right.
So depending on your game, you want to reduce this. Like Chris, your dungeon, you can only see 10 meters. So you can probably really reduce this. I recommend starting with 500. Those of you that are doing the Gaia stuff, obviously if you're doing a fly through, you're going to want to keep that, maybe even extend it beyond 1000. But if you're walking along the ground and it's a forested area, 500 meters is pretty far, right? So the near is 0.3. Obviously that's 30 centimeters. So I guess what that means is it's going to render anything outside of 30 centimeters, I guess. And that's where your eye is above, you're walking around as a humanoid. You're not going to see probably less than 0.3, but you can adjust that setting as well if you want.
The one reason why you would to do that, the clipping planes, is for like the arms and stuff like that, and guns that are in front of the camera.
That's true. Yeah.
If you bring it to as close as you can, it won't clip so bad. So I think the lowest is like, is it 0.1? Might be less than that. But I do that I'll do that with my shooters for sure.
That's a good idea. Yeah, good point. That you do have near objects.
And it'll clip into it and it'll look really bad if you don't do that.
He's recommending for his game 200 because it's a low poly game,
Right.
And there's not much going on. But I think for most of you, but go ahead and set it. I think setting it low and then looking at your game and then noticing it, I think is a really good instructive.
Yeah, that'll help
exercise
you
there.
understand it.
Yeah, that'll help you understand it.
If you've got like a 500 meter terrain, I would set it at like 500 or 600. You don't need 1000 for that, but it'll help with your frame rate. So you play with that a little bit.
So he's talking now, Stephen, about batching, that
Yeah.
you really want to reduce this number.
Yeah.
And mine is pretty low already because there's not much on there. But he's got like 294 batches on his simple game. So check that number and we're going to go through a series of steps to reduce that. But go ahead, and this is definitely one I think you want to play with, is that far clipping planes. And have a look at what those look like. And again, I think 200 is probably too low, but Stephen recommends 500, so try that.
Sometimes I'll leave it at 1,000 just because if you've got a large terrain, let's say it's 1 kilometer, what happens is you're going along, stuff will pop, like your mountains will pop and stuff like that, if you know what I mean, like into view, and that can be a little bit much. You use the fog and the lighting to help with that some. So you don't notice it quite as bad. So I advise everybody to put some fog in.
That's a good idea.
Fog can also mess with your frame rate a little bit, so be careful of that. But and that's in the lighting tab in the environment part.
So I click lighting.
Lighting, go to click on environment at the top,
Environment.
and down at the bottom, it's got other settings, fog. If you click on that, you get an exponential squared is what you should keep it. Now I change the color sometimes depending upon my scene. If you've got a dark scene, you don't want to have gray fog because it'll kind of be light. I
want
put
dark
in like
fog.
a darker fog.
Well, like,
Or sometimes with terrains, I'll make it like a blue purple. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but sometimes if you're traveling and there's mountains in the background pretty far away, they have like a purple blue tint to it. And I always found that kind of neat. So that's just something to play with. And then the
there's
density.
also just moisture in the air when you're looking across, like, across a landscape. There's moisture in the air that will make things hazy and fuzzy. That's why in the desert, if you've ever been to the desert, you can see for miles and it's like crystal clear.
Yeah.
There's no water vapor in the air. I think in the dungeon, there's smoke, right? From the torches.
Yeah. I wouldn't mess with fog when you're in the dungeons because it looks really weird.
Okay.
Depending upon where it is. The smoke from that, I just use the particle effects for that.
Okay, good
that-
point.
It does look weird. Like I've seen it where it's like my fog is fairly clear or close and it's in the dungeon and I'm like, ew, that looks really bizarre off in the corner. But it's all playing around with it and seeing what you like.
Yeah, a lot of the assets that I see that have landscapes and like mountains and trees, they always include fog, a lot of fog or mist or kind of like just haze. And it just makes it look really good.
And it works really well when you have like the dust storm thing up for clouds and stuff like that, right? Because what this does is it basically gives everything at a certain density. The density number changes where it is.
Here.
Yeah, it changes where it is in your scene, right? So you don't like see a fog hanging. What happens is any asset that's in the way of that fog will start taking on that hue. So the closer you are to it, the less, or the closer that asset is to you, the fog won't be quite as bad. But as it gets farther away, it'll take on that color of the fog more.
Yeah, because you're looking through more air.
Right.
And the air has water vapor or dust in it. And so it's gonna look thicker.
So sometimes I mess with the density number. Let's see what I have on this one that I'm doing. The one that I have right now, my density is at 0.004. And my terrain, I believe, is 1 kilometer. And so what it is once I get to a certain point and I have it as a kind of a bluish color. So it kind of mimics my skybox a little bit. And the farther away it is, the more it looks like my skybox, and it has that haze to it. It just makes it look better if you have something like that and it's an outdoor setup.
I'm gonna move on. There's still a lot to go. So just review this as you need it. The next thing that we're going to talk about is the actual objects. in your environment. So what he did, and I'd like to get your comment on this, Stephen, is he created an empty called environment,
Uh-huh.
just ENV, and then he
Mhm.
put everything in that environment, all
Okay.
the objects.
Yeah.
My plane, I don't have much, but my plane, my crystal, oops, put it in the environment. And then in the he clicked on the empty, and then over here,
The inspector.
in the inspector is static right here.
Yeah.
And he recommends turning that on, and that makes everything, notice that it warns you, I'm gonna make everything static. So make it static. So I assume what that means is that those are not gonna be moving, those objects.
Right.
So your game controller should stay out of the environment, right?
See, he has something, he had something that's environment, but basically it's the same thing as like having a house. You know, he's got everything in an empty,
Yeah,
like all of the pieces to the house are in the empty. If they aren't moving, you make them all static. And that way, one thing he doesn't go over is the nav mesh agent and the nav mesh. Everything that doesn't move needs to be static so that your enemies don't walk through it or try to walk through it.
good point.
So for me, what he was doing is just a normal thing that I would do anyway. I never noticed it change my frame rate because those objects needed to be static anyhow.
Yeah. If they're not static, then your enemies can walk through them.
Yeah. You might have, if you've like placed trees or something like that, by hand. I had to do this with Gina. I had to go in and I'd have to make everything static, all the trees static, bake my nav mesh, and then go back and make the trees not static anymore because they would move in the wind. So if they move a little bit, they aren't going to be static. But yeah, so what he basically did was put everything into an empty so that he could make it so he didn't have to go and highlight everything and change it to static.
So let me clarify. So if it's a tree that will sway with the wind, you cannot check static.
You don't want it to be static.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is because then it won't move.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
That one is self-explanatory. Yeah, everything that isn't moving static.
But you have to make it static if you want it to register on the nav mesh so that the enemies don't try to walk through it. And that happens sometimes.
So if you have
like,
a tree that's blowing, the enemies could walk through it.
yeah, some will be able to walk through it.
I think I've seen that.
But that's with the nav mesh, right? Because the nav mesh, what it does is if anything is static, it will make that blue area that the enemies can walk on. And so that's why you turn the trees static, or maybe you have some bushes, right? And you want your enemies to walk through them. So you make the bushes not static, and then they can walk through the bushes. You see what I mean?
Yeah, because they'll, like a dinosaur, will be able to walk through the bushes.
Right. You don't want even an enemy, right? If it's a low bush, you don't want don't want anything to be able to walk through your trees, through your tree stumps.
I do that all the
What I
time.
mean? Smack your head up against the trunk of the tree, right?
I was like, where did it go? It's inside
Yeah.
a tree.
It's like really weird. Like I've seen that where some of the trees that you get don't have colliders on them, and then you can walk through them. And boy, that just destroys the immersion right there.
I think maybe as you're building the game in the future, you kind of just put everything as static
Right.
to begin with, and
Yeah.
and that will, if you don't want, if they're not going to move anyway, and you don't want your players walking through it, set it to static, walls and
Right.
trees and stuff. Okay, so the
Yeah.
next thing we're going to do is the canvas. Okay, So the canvas is different in that there's a bunch of things that we don't need for the canvas. It's only going to show at the beginning of the game and when you pause the game at the end of the game, right? So what he recommends for anything that's inside the canvas, the buttons, is like I have an object that I just did on the canvas, and you don't want, see what he's got here is turn off the raycast
Raycast.
target.
Yeah,
Where is the
Down in the
raycast
image.
target?
go down a little bit. Down, down, down. It's the third one from the very bottom.
Right
There
there.
you go.
Turn that off. And also the maskable, turn that off. I think that's on by default. Is that right, guys?
I believe so.
Yeah. So in other words, maskable is it's see-through. Is that right? A mask is something that actually it's the opposite. It's not see-through, right?
Yeah.
The raycast target didn't explain what that is.
I know what, I bet you I know what that is. So I think what's going on is if it's a raycast target, it works for the buttons and stuff, right? So that you're using the cursor over it and the cursor can find it. There's no point in having a raycast target if you don't need to click on it with the cursor.
Yeah.
I guess that's the point. So if you just have a word up there, what's a point of having it being a raycast? You know, a raycast is it's the ray is being shot out from the camera to recognize everything, and you don't really need to do that. I kind of understand that.
Next setting is on the canvas here. You don't need it to be pixel perfect. It doesn't need to be high res, right? If it's okay, if it's, I mean, it's just an interface element. I'm not sure what that actually means, whether it's like placed perfectly or whether it looks crisp.
No,
and clean.
it looks crisp and clean. And for regular UI, I was taught to use that to but it might not be so bad right now with Text Mesh Pro, because
Yeah.
Text Mesh Pro is so much cleaner.
Yeah.
We aren't using Text Mesh Pro this time, so I don't know.
Try it, guys, and
Try it and see if it helps.
Yeah, let us know if that he didn't really show his canvas. It looks, I can't tell what's on there. But again, it's just one of those things where you may not notice it here, and it could save you a little bit of optimization. It may give you a little bit more optimization. It makes sense that the canvas is different. You don't need it to be high res. All right, so the next section is rigid bodies. So he recommends, let's see, where do I want to add one of these rigid bodies on? He adds it to his players. I don't have a player.
What's going on? I can't remember what he was doing with the rigid bodies.
He added it to his players. I don't have any players here. So if
I
you
think
go
that
to
might be like he's adding it to his any AI or something like that.
He
That's
just
my
basically
guess.
went to his player, go to your player, add a component, and add a rigid body.
They already should, their players should all have rigid bodies on them, I believe
Yeah,
already.
I think that you already have a rigid body. So let me just make one here for you so I can show you his settings. Okay, so he's telling you to take off use gravity and keep on is kinematic. Put on is kinematic and take the discrete setting and change it to continuous speculative.
So you could, what I would
All right.
do for your actual players is you have to use gravity. You're going to have to take off is kinematic, but change it to continuous specular. And the reason is if you don't have gravity on your player, he's not going to
It'll
fall.
fall through. Yeah.
He's
I
not
don't know
going to
why
fall
he
from
took his
anything.
off. I don't know why.
This might be he's actually talking about his AI or something like that in it. But the continuous specular, I've seen that before. And of course, that's something I always forget to do. So you could do that to your rigid bodies.
Turn it on in from discrete.
Yeah.
Discrete means, individual, you just set kind of like set in a discrete number would be a specific number. Continuous means you're getting a range of collisions. Is that what that is? Collision detection.
Right.
So continuous speculative meaning, I guess, you're going to get a range of detection. In other words, you don't need to detect everything, maybe.
Yeah, that might be it. I can't remember, to be
I
honest.
wish you would take some more time and explain why. But the gravity, you're right. That doesn't make any sense. You're just going to be falling.
Yeah,
I don't
if
know why
you're-
his players don't fall through his environment.
Well, it's because they're hitting something, but what it is they might just be walking around, let's say you have an enemy that's just walking around on the nav mesh and it's not jumping from anywhere or anything like that. You don't really, I don't know if you would need gravity for that because it just follows the nav mesh. I'll have to mess with that. I'll have to try that sometime and see what that does.
Okay.
Trying the pixel perfect thing. That I don't notice any difference.
Yeah, then turn it off.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it would.
Kind of the general rule that I just try to I think that all the multimedia students need to kind of just learn these compression techniques. It's
Yeah.
something that I very rarely see students do, but I'm always bugging them. It's kind of like, why spend $25 on a hamburger when you can get it for, In-N-Out burger for $4 and it tastes the same, right?
Right.
Now, if it doesn't taste the same, then you got to ask yourself, yeah, but is it worth $25?
Right.
Maybe not. Maybe it's only worth, how much is a hamburger worth to you? I spent $16 on a hamburger in Canada. It was like 16 US and it just was a ripoff. I thought maybe the Canadians are just idiots. I don't know.
Or could be the Canadians assuming that that's the closest hamburger joint.
They just don't know how to make a hamburger. I travel a lot and hamburgers are seem to like be really simple to do, but they're not. They're just like,
No.
It's not easy to get a hamburger when you're not in America.
You have to know
It's
how.
kind of hard
You need to know how to do a good burger.
It's hard because you have to know how well you like your meat also.
They just don't. It's like they either smother it in gravy, like they have this gravy in Canada. I don't know why you'd wreck a hamburger by putting gravy in it. It gets the bread all soggy. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. But
Maybe it's the poutine.
they don't grill it, they fry it.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, a fried hamburger.
I could tell you also, it also depends on how people like it because
Yeah.
I mean, there's actually quite a bit to it. Actually, you're absolutely right. It could be that it's too cooked, right? Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into the materials. So I have, let's see, we're going to go into materials and we're going to go to the shaders up here for your materials. Now, this one doesn't relate to you guys, but I thought I'd mention it. If you're doing a game for Android, he's recommending that the mobile, which one is it? Vertilex mobile. Yeah,
Vertex lit.
Yeah, he says that's really killer for Android phones. Shaders are really important. If you remember from, was it last week or the week before, when I did my particle generator, my particle fire, the shader was critical. Unless I chose the right shader, it just did not look right. So anyway, I thought I'd throw that out there, that there are different settings for Android phones. I did a lecture yesterday. Stephen came and talked to us, but after you left, Stephen, I showed him some stats for the size of the gaming industry.
Mhm.
It is so much bigger than almost anything else. It's as
Yeah.
big as the movie, streaming. The only thing that it's not bigger than is is kind of terrestrial television. You know, like your
Yeah.
general, basically, you know, every mid-sized city has their own TV station. The gaming industry is actually bigger than that industry, but it's way bigger than movies, for example. Like
What is it? It's movies and music
Yes.
combined. It's
Oh,
more
it's
than
way
those.
bigger. It's way bigger than music and movies combined. It's like 5 times bigger.
Yeah.
I've seen everywhere from 300 billion to 700 billion. But the reason I point this out is that a lot of that growth is in mobile games. And as Stephen mentioned to our class yesterday, Unity is really one of the best tools around for creating mobile games.
I think it's bigger than movies because they're very expensive to produce, and they're, you know, you only need only certain people makes money of it. But then in gaming, even like me, who
Their
doesn't even
variety
game,
of price
I can
is-
try, you know, I can buy a game, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you probably have, if you're a gamer, you don't have just one game.
Mhm,
Right.
I know.
Probably got like
Mhm.
a lot of, I mean, I have like 6 games, even though I don't have time to play them.
Right.
I've got, you know, already I'm collecting games, and I'll probably collect a lot more over the break. Just so, the reason I pointed out is that there's a lot of growth potential, and that's kind of the game. That's kind of what our main thing is for us, is that we want to know where things are going to be in 5 years,
Mhm.
so that we can plan our curriculum to get you guys ready for 5 years down the road, right? And I can tell you without reservation that the mobile space is super important. And the other thing I like about mobile games is they're probably simpler, and they're easier to make. They're faster to make. There's probably more people working on them. So where I learn things like that, I'll point it out. But he really thinks that Vertex Lit shader is really great for Android games. Don't know why it doesn't work for iOS games.
No idea.
He says it's one of the best performance shaders. He says you can use it for PC as well. So you guys might, those of you that are PC people, you might try it and just see. Now on mine, it looks terrible. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, see that?
Yeah.
So it makes a huge difference for certain things, but again, try it and see if you get the performance out of it. So I got to go back. I know I got to go back here to Legacy. I have no idea why it's a Legacy shader if it's so important for
Is it a
No.
particle under legacy?
particles, and it's additive. And let's just double check that that's working.
It might just be because that's how it was created.
Yeah, it was created with that shader. Yeah.
Legacy's just older stuff.
All right. So you suggest going again and playing this. For him, he went back and used the standard shaders, even though his game looked fine. He thinks you can get rid of the reflections as well. Where is he? He's back on the,
I think you're still playing.
oh, I am playing it. Thank you. Come on, where am I? He's on material, sorry. Let's go in here to materials. And I know I'm using this one. He says you can get rid of the reflections. Hold on. For his game, he doesn't want the reflections, but I'm not sure you want to get rid of that. I imagine that for water, right?
I would think it depends upon the material.
Yeah,
If you want it to be nice and shiny and stuff, you might want the reflections on there, but if
I
it's
think so,
flat,
yeah.
then it,
Well, I tried
maybe
it on
not.
mine.
Uh-huh.
I tried it on mine without the reflections. It looked fine for this material here. He also suggests that you do the rendering mode standard. No, what did he do? He did,
But what you're looking at is a little higher. I think you're looking at the
Oh.
shader part, right? Where it says
Yeah.
standard.
yeah, standard. Sorry, you're right.
And you can take out like the metallic map and the height map. That'll help too.
Here,
Normal map, yeah, you can do that kind of stuff also. That might help a little bit. The normal map, if you don't need the normal map, you can take it out. But I tend to leave that stuff if they've already got it set up.
the other thing he said is you can turn down the smoothness.
Yeah.
I did that on mine. I didn't notice any difference. It's counterintuitive. I think that you'd want things smooth and even, but again, depending on the game, you can turn that off.
It's a lot of it is how does it look? You
Yeah.
know, what can you get away with?
I want to
Mhm.
share my experience with the shader that I downloaded from
Uh-huh.
Asset Store. I was
Yeah.
looking and looking for a package and I couldn't find it. And as it turned out, when I looked at home, it was under, it's not standard, but aubergine or aubergine. And then you keep clicking on the folders. And then in the end, yeah, I found my balloon shader.
And it
So
was important, right? Yeah, it made it look a lot better. Okay, so let me just get my place here. Next, we're going to go to lighting. And this is where he says really the metal, the rubber hits the road here. I think this is where you can save a lot of processing cycles and just really improve your optimization. There's a little bit of a difference between his interface and ours. I don't understand why, because this is from 2020.
Mm-hmm. What version is he using?
I don't know, but it looks a little bit different. So what you want to do is we're going to go to our lighting and we're going to go to environment. He doesn't have this. He has it as just direct. He just has it as lighting here. It looks different. But what he wants you to do is right here under, see, where am I? Gosh, this is so confusing. Is it type directional? Let's see. He's going into lighting and the mode. Where's the mode setting? Real time? Nope.
No.
I did do this. I think it's environment. Color.
Yeah, okay.
And
I
then
think that's
mode.
what you were talking about.
There's
Right.
a color to the light. I don't see. Oh, here we go. Mode right there. Sorry. Gosh. So
That's in the other settings. So that wasn't what you were looking for, because that deals with the fog. So where was this? Bounce. Are you sure it wasn't the go back to the environment again? Or is it in the light settings? Light map
time
settings?
lighting, it's under light.
Environmental lighting. Do you know about how far you are?
So he's
into
got
the
it under
tutorial?
directional light. Click on directional light, and then he's got lighting here. And he
Oh,
doesn't
it's gotta
have
be
these
in the
tabs.
inspector.
Oh, it's in the inspector. You know what? Yes, you're right. It's different. It's in the inspector. Oh, you know what? That's right. I'm just,
Yeah,
yeah, the trouble I have with a lot of the tutorials is he just kind of assumes that you're a wizard and that he's actually does have the inspector set, but he didn't tell us.
yeah, he's
You
just
go,
looking
okay.
at the direct light.
Yeah, he didn't go, okay, go to directional light, go to the inspector. Okay. So obviously the color matters. But what he has you do first is under mode, baked. So that will, or mixed, one or the other. So I think I understand real time versus mixed versus baked, but you want to kind of define that for us, Stephen?
Okay, so real time is if your light's moving around, it's going to change shadows and stuff. So for instance, if you're carrying a torch, that's got to be real time, right? It's not going to be baked.
Because the shadows will change and the
right.
lighting will change. Yeah.
Right. Your directional light, if it's moving, if it's a sun and it actually is rotating, then you would keep it as real time. I can see why he would make his baked because his isn't moving anywhere. Okay, and so what happens is he'd go into the lighting tab, he would bake his lighting, and what happens is it bakes the shadows into place, and so it takes less computing power to deal with baked shadows compared to real-time shadows, because obviously real-time the shadow moves, and when it's baked it doesn't.
So you're going to have a mixture. Some stuff can be baked because the shadows aren't going to change. And some of
Right.
it is, so he recommends mixed, which
Right.
makes sense to me.
So
Well-
in other words, if you're running around with your character and you've got guns or whatever, or you have a third person character, the sun, even if the sun isn't moving in the sky, it's still going to change the shadows that the character or your NPCs or your enemies are creating, right? And so that's why you would make it mixed, because there's going to be some things that are static, and the static things would get baked lighting, and then the things that are running around are real time. Does that make sense?
Does make total sense. This one actually makes sense. A lot of the other stuff, I don't know. It's just like black magic. Like, okay, just, put a frog's leg in there and a new nose and then some,
And
some
poof, you've got a
cauliflower.
purple particle.
Yeah. We're back to the hard shadows again. And the strength, he recommends bringing the strength down for real-time shadows. I guess that means less processing power creating the shadows or making them
I
less
think so.
intense.
Yeah. I'm surprised you didn't say anything about use quality settings with the resolution. I guess you could try changing that, but I would just leave it. And it was right under the real-time shadow strength. See where it says use quality settings? See, you could use a different resolution for it, but that would be for like your shadows and stuff. So you would want, because if you're using low resolution for your shadows, it's just going to look like it's a sphere or something like that. So the higher the resolution on your shadows, the more the shadows are defined. So like I've seen it where I had a lower resolution for the shadows, and I'm playing a third person game, and the shadow under the third person character is just like it's like a little round shadow instead of you seeing his arms and legs in the shadow. You see what I'm saying about that? So that I'm surprised you never said anything about that, but that, if you're doing a really low poly game, you might want to mess with that. I wouldn't necessarily do it, but you might want to mess with that, and that'll definitely change the computations for your shadows.
Now, because we set that to mixed, right? We're going to need to bake some of the lighting.
Yeah.
So what he recommends you do is go to your players and turn them off, because the players are not going to be baked at all, right?
Yeah.
So disable those temporarily, and then you go back to lighting, if I remember correctly, and click on bake, generate lighting right here.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So you probably don't want to do that now, because I did this with my simple game and it took, like 5 minutes or so. that might take an hour. I don't know.
Can you repeat that what you just said? Like you
Yeah.
chose mixed and then what?
So I went to the inspector
Mhm,
and
you
under
chose-
mode under light, right?
Mhm,
Which
mhm.
it's confusing to me because that's why I thought it was under the lighting tab, but
Mhm.
it's not. It's under inspector in the light area. If I'm directional light, change the mode from real time to
To
mixed,
mix.
because you're going to do some real time shadow and some stuff
Some
that
bake.
doesn't need to be. The shadows aren't going to change. Now, because you're doing mixed, we're going to go ahead and bake the lighting, right? By generating the lighting here. I think mine's grayed out because I didn't change anything. In fact, I think.
Let's see if you go to the scene. The actual, in the lighting tab, go to the scene where it's right next to the environment. Okay, yeah, it's still great.
Got auto generate on too.
I hate auto generate. I never use auto
It
generate.
takes too long. It slows you down.
What it does is every time you put an object in there that's static or something, it'll start regenerating the lighting.
And you
And
have to
so
wait.
You
Yeah.
have to wait, and then after a while, usually it only takes a few seconds, but once you start getting a bunch of stuff in there, it takes longer. Now, they said that it used to make it so that it would, when you did the auto generate and went through its whole thing, that it would make it easier for the actual lighting to generate when you did generate lighting. But I don't know. This is why this stuff is really complicated. So I just
Oh.
always turned off auto generate. And now when you start, it seems that they already have it all kind of started, because that's why, I don't know if I mentioned this at the beginning, when I was first starting a project, I would go in and before I put anything out, I would generate the lighting. And the reason was because if I was in a game and I was going from, and I didn't do a light bake later on, and if it looks like the lights are generated and it's nice and bright, and then you go to another scene and then you would go back, the lights wouldn't be generated again and it would be dark. But I think it's been working. They've set it up so that it doesn't do that anymore. So auto generate's been turned off and stuff like that when I'm starting things. So they might be taking care of that problem.
Mine was on. But he doesn't have his on. He has his
Yeah.
off.
So I always turn it off.
It makes sense because it's kind of get in the way of your flow of, you're gonna have to keep waiting.
Yeah, and then it lags and you're trying to drop something into the scene and it's freaking messing around with the lighting, and it's just like, I don't need that now. You're slowing me down.
So turn off your players and then go ahead and generate the lighting. Don't do that now because it'll delay. And I want to keep going, but you'll generate the lighting and then look at the game and check it.
And notice he has at the very bottom, it says one directional light map. 256 by 256
Yep.
px, right? And so that means that he has a light map made. Otherwise, I think everybody else would have, it would just be 0. Total
And-
bake time.
It looks like my my baking device is my graphics card.
Yeah.
Is that a good graphics card? I don't know much about graphics.
I don't know
cards.
about the Radeons. I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
Yeah, I don't know either. It was about
What's the Radeon part number?
it's an RX 580. They come in 580, 570, 590.
Yeah,
I probably need to upgrade that at
That's-
some point.
yeah, you're looking, that's, I've been seeing like 1060 or the 1060 or GeForce GTX 1060
Yeah,
or
so it's different.
Radeon RX 580, so it's somewhere around that level. But they tend to be like cheaper than GeForce.
Yeah. So it probably isn't that bad.
Yeah.
It's attractive, huh?
So he recommends that before you generate the lighting, you go up here to mixed lighting, open that up. You're going to bake the global illuminate, and then the lighting mode should be subtractive, and the options are baked indirect, shadow mask, or subtractive. I have no idea what that means.
Got me on that too.
Yeah, I don't know. Mixed lights provides a baked, direct, and indirect lighting for static objects. Dynamic objects receive real-time direct light. We already know that. Okay, I'm not sure why subtractive is what he recommends.
Maybe it just makes it better, or it doesn't calculate something in it.
Okay, then the light map settings, here. He says you can play around with these numbers. He says this should be 40, light map resolution, 40. Sorry. He says you can go as low as 10 or maybe 20. Again, he's got a low res game, so maybe start with 10 and have a look at it. I guess that's the resolution, the crispness of the light resolution. I don't know.
Yeah, you might see it. Might be one of those things that you actually see once you baked out the lights. I've had little dots and stuff like that after I've done some of this stuff, and I was like, oh my God, get rid of that, right?
Here's our resolution again in powers
So
of 2, 1024, 512. I think the default is 1024. Try 512 or 256 and see how it looks.
Question is, when you say, do you mean if you did like the baked lighting, can you go back?
Yes,
Okay.
and set it to all dynamic.
Mhm.
But I'm not sure
How
that
do I,
makes sense though, right? Because not everything needs dynamic lighting.
So you can you can regenerate your lights again now.
Yeah.
Because you've been messing around with the numbers. Now that directional, he has one directional light map. If you bake your lights again, it'll get rid of that light map and create a new one.
Yeah.
So I do remember they were having some problems way back when, and people were like baking lights onto objects like a spaceship or something like that, and the guy was having a problem, and so he was having to take out his light maps and bring them back in. It was doing all this crazy stuff, and I was like, boy, if this guy's having problems, I'm really getting in for
Yeah.
it. So
He does recommend compressing the light maps. That makes sense to me. I guess they're pretty memory intensive, and so you want to compress them. And I guess they get uncompressed on the fly in the game. I guess that's how that works. Is it makes your file maybe smaller and then it uncompresses it during play runtime.
Where is it?
it's right under the
Under
scene.
light mapping settings. Yeah, sorry, but there's so many settings. And then underneath your max light map size is compressed light maps.
Compressed light map, okay.
The light mapper here, he's recommending
GPU, progressive GPU.
progressive GPU from CPU. It was CPU. So what I'm doing here is I'm letting my graphics processor do this light mapping.
And that actually makes sense to
That
me.
makes total sense. Yeah. You've got all this memory on your GPU. Why not use it? Right. Makes sense. So that you're taking less a strain on your CPU and letting your graphics processor do as much
Yeah.
as it can. Makes sense. He says it'll go faster if you do this. Yeah. Because the baking does take time.
And I think this is more set up for GPU now.
Is it?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that was something that when I first started that they weren't really focusing on. They had a different light map baker. And now this one is really made for GPU.
Makes sense. And then he said you can play around with these numbers here. So we're doing good. We have time. So I think I'll stop. The recording or pause it.
um,
Okay,
Good.
so after you've got your lights baked, you want to go into your material, your models, right? And what the example was is he put all the models in one location in his assets folder, so it makes it easier. Select all the models. I dragged one out here as an example. And then under the inspector, scroll down, it'll look like this when you first click on the model. Scroll down, and at the very bottom is the generate light map UVs. Click that and then open your settings and adjust these settings and kind of play around with them. The scene might look bad when you render, when you bake your lights. And so if that's the case, go in here and add the light maps for your models, and then go back and go to your lighting and regenerate the lighting. And that should look better then, hopefully.
Had situations where I baked a light map and it came out really bad and I wasn't able to get rid of it. And then I just went and found where the light maps were in my project window. I think there's I believe it'll set up something for that, a folder or something like that. Found out where they were and I just deleted them. I'll be
Okay.
honest, I'm not sure where it goes though.
Now, when he did this generate lighting, remember that we're baking in the lights for the stuff that's static. What happened with his game, I can't demonstrate it because I don't have a player, but his players were the lighting was different and it looked bad. With the lighting, you don't want some objects to be really, really bright and others to be not so bright, unless they're a light source, right? But this is like the players were just really shining very brightly. So what he did is he went back to the lighting tab. And where was this again? Sorry, let me find where this is. So we want to find ambient color for the lighting. Let's see, he doesn't have the light selected. Real-time lighting, where's the lighting color?
You're talking about in the environment? Is it in the
Real-time lighting, where's the skybox lighting?
environment?
Here, environment. Real-time shadow right here. He changed this, and when he changed it and made it lighter or darker, his game changed immediately. And so
Yeah.
what he did is he brought down the players were too bright, and he just kind of brought down the lighting by changing the color, and I guess making it lighter or darker. What did he do? He added I can't. So in other words, anything that's dynamically being lit, if you change the color here, it'll change it in real time over here. There we go. See that? See, look at my fire right here. It's not changing much, but it is changing. On his, it was real obvious. Maybe if I change the color here.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can see it a little bit.
It's a little bit, but yours may be different. But I think the idea here is you've got two different kinds of lighting. You got the dynamic real time that changes, and the stuff that's static. And I guess this is just a way to go back and recalibrate your dynamic lighting so it doesn't look so weird. It looks more like your baked lighting, not too bright, not too dark. Again, watch the video that I've linked and you'll see it really clearly on his.
I'll try to generate
Just wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
light map fully.
Yeah, he's up to 500 FPS now, and he started at 30 or 40. So I think maybe he chose this game as a great example. That your mileage may vary, but it probably won't be as good as his. But his is tremendously faster now, and it looks to me identical.
I don't think I can hit 500 on mine because mine's more detailed.
Oh, there it is. There's a little triangle next to generate lighting. If you click on that, it says bake reflection probes and it says clear bake data. So if you have a problem and you've baked it and it looks bad, you can clear the data from it.
Where's that, Stephen?
The generate
And the
lighting
generate
button.
lighting button,
Here,
there's
clear
that
baked
little,
data.
yeah.
Yeah,
So that'll clear the light maps.
Yeah.
And the bake reflection probes, I didn't expect to see that one. Because the reflection probes are, like I said, it's like for glass and stuff, and you can, anything that's reflective, and it'll reflect whatever's in the backgrounds and stuff like that.
well, I'm
You
glad
have
we're
to
getting
put
to
those
more
out.
advanced. These are more advanced topics, but I'm glad we're doing that. Just at the end here, while it's,
Well, you
it's
get-
good to push it forward.
You get to see it. You might
Yeah,
not
yeah,
do
yeah.
it, but you get to see it and know it's there.
Yeah, again, you just got to do it, and maybe the next game you'll know this ahead of time, and it'll be better and faster. All right, now the next one's easier. We're going to go back to the game settings. Project settings, and we're going to go to physics. Here, physics is in other words, how does your object behave as if it was in the real world with forces that are natural and gravity and all that stuff. So he recommends turning off auto sync transforms. Sorry, yeah, auto sync transforms, turn it off. You don't need it, is what he said for his game.
I can't remember what that's supposed to do.
Okay, turn off the auto sync transforms. Not quite sure what that is. Let's see, that's
Mine's
decides
turned
whether
off.
or not whether or not to automatically sync transform changes with the physics system whenever a transform component changes.
Okay, so this is all right. This is I think this is a problem because these guys need to have this on, if I remember correctly. And the reason is because it makes it so that you can teleport, or you can, like, when you die, you go back to your starting position. I'm pretty positive about that one.
Cool. All right. Well,
Because I just remembered that I was trying to figure out why was the character dying, but he wasn't going back to his
Oh,
starting
man.
location, and that's what that is.
wow. Imagine having to go through all these menus and trying to figure that out.
Yeah, I looked it up and luckily
Yeah.
found it, and I'm like, I've been trying to figure out why the character wasn't going back to his spot, his beginning spot when I was doing that, and that's why, because
So this is
it's-
really, this
it's
is a bit
automatically
dangerous.
turned off.
So what you want to be doing in the future is before you do all these optimizations, make a copy. And then if you break something, go back to the copy and go, whew, okay, now it's working. The spawn is now working. Okay, what did I change that caused that to break?
Right.
That's really the only way to survive with something that's so complex, right? But that makes sense. In other words, if you don't need this capability because you're not respawning, sync transform changes with the physics system. What are transform changes?
The transform change would be me telling the player when it's over in a certain area that I want it to go to a different transform spot, a different X, Y, and Z.
So the transform spot is where you're transforming an object to make it appear.
So right. In other words, so what's happening is they have characters, or their player, when their player hits 0 health, it's telling it that they want to send it to a different transform spot. So in other words, it's syncing those transform spots. Without that checked, it won't go to that spot.
Okay. That's really handy to know. So we use a lot of spawn points.
Yeah.
So we want to keep that on.
And I don't know if that'll affect the enemies, but it definitely affects the player.
Respawning.
Yeah. So in other words, it's like trying to get out of the world. They have some triggers that, they run into the trigger and it says, no, you can't go there. And it sends you back to the beginning again, or, throws you off to a different place. If that's not checked, it won't do that.
All right, we're almost done. So we're gonna move forward to material, go to your materials. I think I talked about this before, but he covers it now. So go to your materials. Let's close the project settings here. And you're gonna go to your materials. Again, I have this tiled floor. And he recommends that you, what is he doing here? Let's
You have to
see.
go to the inspector. You're in the lighting tab.
He recommends enabling the GPU instancing. I guess that's the graphic processor is creating new instances of your objects, I guess, or your materials.
I think what it is it makes it so that the GPU is actually doing it instead of the CPU.
Yes, it's rendering that instance. So in other words, it's rendering all these instances, my little tiling here. He recommends that you set your smoothness to 0. Remember I did that before? Yeah, he recommends it. I tried it on mine. It didn't make any difference at all. So I set that to 0. And what else is he doing here? He is. Oh, the specular highlights. Reflections and specular highlights, he said you don't need. Where
Down
are they?
below. There's
Right
a-
here,
they're the
these
yeah.
two, he says you don't need them. I tried it as well and it didn't make any difference to me, so I left them off. I think you need reflections for water, right?
Yeah.
So your
Anything,
Gaia,
anything
yeah.
that's shiny and stuff, you would need the reflections.
yeah, I think your Gaia biomes that was created for you with the water that was really beautiful, that probably needs that setting. But try it, see what happens. And that's a good way to learn what that is. The specular highlights, that has to do with the material, the way that the light plays off the material and it highlights certain areas, giving it kind of a depth. Is that what that is?
Yeah. And you know, you've got standard for the materials or for the shader at the top. You have standard and there's also standard specular. So there's sometimes you can get different. See how down at the very bottom, it says standard specular setup.
Right here.
Yeah, you can set them up like that and then you can bring in some other maps. And it's slightly different. See, it's got a specular there now.
Yeah, here.
And you can do that. It's not as cost effective, but it'll make things look a little bit better sometimes. It's really up to you if you want to use that or not.
So
And I guess
go ahead.
I guess if it's lighter or darker, it changes the specular part of it, so it makes it a little more shiny or something like that.
So he says that to do this for all your materials. So he only had 2 materials, so he did it twice. So again, I think it underscores the need to put all your materials in one place.
Yeah.
Just makes it easier than just moving around and finding them all to set these settings.
I'd be safe.
You just go through each package and find all the materials and mess with them like that if you need to. It takes time. This thing is not light baking right anymore. It's really messed up.
What's a MIP map? He talks about sprites, and the next section is take your sprites and turn off the generate MIP maps.
I have no idea what that is, to be honest. I really don't.
Yeah. He had us generate MIP maps earlier, right? For the materials or textures. I don't remember which. But I guess for sprites, sprites are vector objects that I guess for 2D, right?
Yeah. What happened here?
So he's going in and he's changing some settings in the sprites. There's some compression settings there.
And that sprites tend to be used with 2D. You do change the pictures and stuff into 2D sprites, your images when you're putting those in. I don't know if that'll mess with it that much, but
Yeah,
it's-
essentially what a sprite is you have an object and you can duplicate it as many times as you want, and it doesn't take any memory. It just basically recreates them on the fly using programming or using, like equations. So unlike bitmaps, we have to actually bring in the actual, text image. The sprites are just duplicated without any cost of overhead. So makes sense that they'd be 2D. So the very last thing he talks about is the profiler. Where's the profiler?
Is it
Control
in the,
7. Okay, I hit Control 7 on my PC.
oh, okay.
It probably was going to be try Control 7. Oh, you're not on your Mac, right? Says
Control 7. Yeah, I'll remember that. Profiler. Just
yeah,
I
the
can Google-
profiler.
I can
So-
Google it out.
He brought up the profiler, and I guess you play the game, and it gives you.
Yeah, it shows you where your spikes are and stuff like that. I've never really used this. I'm not very good at looking at this kind of stuff and dealing with it. I kind of understand it, but Jeff was better at it than I am. He understands those graphs better than me, but and you can see it has rendering, scripts, physics, animations, garbage collector, and all that stuff. So those colors are showing you what everything is doing, right? And when it's doing it.
Rendering scripts. So these spikes are rendering spikes.
Yeah,
is
and
that
they're
right?
probably, it looks like it,
Or is that garbage collector? I can't tell. It looks like it's brown, right?
garbage collector is underneath it, and the rendering is the top green line is my.
Oh, and you can
is
turn
what
it
I'm
off as
figuring.
well. So you can turn off everything, and I guess.
It's interesting.
So we're only looking at scripts. Yeah, there we go. So I'm only looking at scripts, or I'm only looking at rendering
Right now you're looking at scripts and
animation. Yeah.
but you don't have any. And then, so that's just showing you. So if you look at it, it's probably those spikes have to do with particle effects is my guess.
Yep.
And how they're popping up and stuff and how it's changing.
Yeah.
And there are people that look at this stuff and are able to go through and figure out where their problems are. And work with it. I have never, this is even beyond me. I'm not used to it at all.
Yeah. He says that he has a special, and then there's let's see, he's rendering out text data down here. Why is that not? He has like draw calls and total batches. There's a bunch of
Yeah.
text information down here. Why is that not playing? Okay, maybe. Wow,
There you go.
that's wild. He's got that on, and wow, that's wild. I
And
don't-
so this is really technical, and so people are able to look at this stuff and go, oh, here, this is where you have your problem. You're like, what?
Yeah. Oh, that's red there. Okay.
Right.
I did something. I'm not sure what I did. He says he has a special video just for this one, for the profiler.
I
That he
believe
gets
it.
into it in more detail. But yeah, it's this stuff is deep. Anyway, that's a video that I found. I like this one better than many of the others that I saw. There's a bunch of them that are up there on optimizing. It's weak in terms of explaining what he's doing. I mean, why he's doing what he's doing. But I do like that he's very efficient. And this is a 13-minute video that he just covers a lot of material. And I thought it'd be a good review for us. I don't know if I'll ever do this again in class, but I thought it was really good at this point, at least for me to review a lot of stuff that we've talked about, but didn't really get into much detail. I thought it was quite good. So I've got it up there. If you have an opinion on whether, this was useful, let me know. There's certainly other tutorials on optimization. I thought this one was the best kind of bang for the buck, and that some of them are very long. They're like 40 minutes or something, and it's just way too detailed. This I thought was good because I'm thinking of actually creating like just a worksheet where you just have, I just tell you to check all these things before you publish, and just, kind of like a checklist.
Yeah, that would be nice. But for this session, it was good too that Stephen is around to also kind of, give feedback.
That's what I thought too, is that it's an opportunity for him to kind of fill in the gaps, because they don't often explain what it is. They assume you're a professional, gamer, and you do this for a living, and you're here 8 hours a day.
Right.
And that just isn't the case for us. Cool. Well, we're at time. So that was perfect timing. I'll turn off the recording, and